Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, July 14th, Bastille Day, for those of you who are, I guess, French. And, well, it's Bastille Day regardless, I guess. Certainly, if you're not French, but you're in France, it's still Bastille Day. 2026. Bastille Day 26, everybody. And, yeah, exciting news. What? I don't know. Lots of things have happened. A lot of things are going to happen later on today. World Cup play returns. I realized this morning that when I was talking with Greg about the different teams in the semifinals, and we, I don't know, summarily said, I can't name the leading scorers on the Spanish team, or they don't have, top contenders for, I guess, what do they call the Golden Boot, the top leading scorers of the tournament. I don't know whether that part is actually, that may be the case, but I realized just this morning that actually there are, a couple of players who really do stand out on the Spanish team, and probably everybody who actually follows football knows that very well. I'm a casual fan at best, but I'm in it for the interest in the international competition more than anything else. But I've come to appreciate the soccer once in a while. I'll probably watch next year in the Women's World Cup again, and Olympic soccer certainly, but it does strike me that, could I name the names? I can't. I can kind of get into the neighborhood of the names. One is the teenage kid, 19-year-old kid on the Spanish team who appears to be quite fantastic. I don't know whether he's, got the numbers in terms of, say, standing up to the goal totals of a Lionel Messi or not, but, and, can I name them? No. There's an L in there, and there's a Y sound in there, and a Yanal or something along those lines, and I'm sorry, I'm just not a good enough fan to remember. We could look it up pretty easily. And then there is the older player. I don't know how old he is. I think looks like, for soccer on the back end of the career, whose name reminds me very much of the former Tour pro golfer who is also Spanish, Jose Maria Olazabal, but is not that name. But it's close to it. It begins with an O. It's got a Y in there, and maybe a Z as well. And sorry, I don't remember his name. But I want to at least say the Spanish have some serious goal scorers, and that's why one of the top-ranked teams in the world, and I'm looking forward to seeing the game. I don't know who I'm rooting for in any of this. I don't have a team anymore in this thing because you all know I'm an American citizen, right? So, that's where my loyalties lay, although I probably can't name a whole lot of people on the U.S. team either, so it's nothing against you, Spain. But anyway, that among the various things occupying our attention, limited attention span today. Lots to catch up on. There are long reads. There are short stories that don't make any sense. Things that do make some sense, things that I know that Greg will bring up tomorrow, so should I bring them up today? Like, for instance, apparently Lindsey Graham's replacement in the Senate is going to be his sister, about whom apparently no one knows anything. I happened to see mentioned on social media yesterday that something like, a little witticism along the way. And hey, guess what, by the way, as I'm checking all my incoming channels. Looks like all the sound levels are 5x5. Mom reports everything sounds pretty good as long as she stays in a certain part of the house. So that might be just an internet connectivity issue on her part. But yeah, okay, good. That is good news. I guess we figured out one way around the sound issues. Anyway, yes. So my mom tells me everything sounds great from down in South Carolina, where they're going to be represented by that other guy's sister. And I think somebody said something like, that democracy is in a healthy place when your new senator is somebody who just had their Wikipedia profile completed about 6 minutes ago. Something like that. It was around that That somewhere in that neighborhood was the comment. I'll see if I can find it so that we can credit. There we are. Jay Willis said it, and Jay Willis looks like he looks like a serious person, and maybe somebody that we ought to know about. He writes about courts, democracy, media, and the raccoon family living in a tree behind his house. Oh, he can come and cover my raccoon family too. And I wish he'd cover them with a burlap sack and take them elsewhere. Actually, I mean, raccoons are cute on, in pictures and all, but I have a raccoon family that I guess thinks a funny thing to do is to poop on the lawn furniture or the patio furniture. So, it's quite unusual, perhaps. Anyway, he writes over at Balls and Strikes, as well as jwillis.net, in case you forget. Where did I read that guy, Jay Willis? Well, now you'll remember. But he had said, democracy is, quote, in a good place. I don't know if he's quoting someone in particular. Is that a reference to something? Anyway, but I get the idea. Democracy is in a good place when the person getting appointed to fill one of just 100 Senate seats, there's a limited number of them, has a Wikipedia page that did not exist before today and got published 6 minutes ago. Oh, I got the number right, 6 minutes ago. We're talking about Darlene Graham Nordone. I don't know, Nordone. Nordone sounds like a pharmaceutical of some kind, maybe something you give to people who have overdosed on opiates to revive them. Nordone. That's not it. Narcan. That's what I'm thinking of, I guess. But all right. What can I tell you? I don't know. The screen grab says she was born in 1964. We got that. An American employment specialist. Is that supposed to mean she runs an employment agency? Or just like, what I know a lot about? People having jobs. Not me, other people. I'm not certain what that's supposed to mean. Now the United States Senator designate, I guess is what we call her until she's sworn in, from South Carolina. Have they got any more information on her? Let's see. Darlene Graham. There we go. Nordone Wiki. That comes up right up at the top. They must have filled in more than that. There's a photo of her from 2015. Great. All right. Looks like a nice picture. What do we know about this? Not about this person. Nothing, I guess. Early life and education. Born in Central South Carolina, but it's presented as though Central, South Carolina. Is that a municipality, a locality in South Carolina, or just, I don't know, somewhere in the middle? I'm not certain. Her parents operated the Sanitary Cafe, which I guess means his did too. And that's how they know it. It's good that it's sanitary. A restaurant, bar, liquor store, and pool hall. Clean living. And the family lived in rooms behind the business. They came up the hard way, I guess. When she was 12 years old, her mother died of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and her father died of a heart attack 15 months later. I guess they filled this out by, taking Lindsey's Wikipedia page and transferring it over. This would be true of her too, but didn't change perhaps the date. How old was she when it all happened? Let's see. After their deaths, Graham's brother Lindsey arranged for her to live with her aunt and uncle in Seneca, South Carolina. About 9 years her senior, Lindsey adopted her before joining the Air Force. What? I'm lost here in all this. I thought this. What? He's the sister. Yeah. Boom. Okay. I don't know what to say. Adopted her. So sister, daughter. I don't get her. Uncle Lindsey. All right. Adopted her. There we go. All right. Now I got you. I forgot that they had said. Yeah. Okay. After that, Graham's brother Lindsey arranged for them. No. I've lost the thread here already. Let me start this over again. So after that, that's Graham's brother, Lindsey, arranged for her to live with her aunt and uncle in Seneca. About 9 years ago, Lindsey adopted her before joining the Air Force. Yeah. I guess that's a thing you do. Like I guess the aunt and uncle didn't adopt her, but okay. That's kind of unusual. Okay, he taught her to spell her first name Darlene, Darline, a spelling she continued to use in adulthood. What was it before? I don't know. What can I tell you? She graduated from the College of Charleston with a Bachelor of Science in Sociology in 1989. She also holds a Master of Arts in Rehabilitation Counseling from South Carolina State University. So here's to Darlene Graham Nordone being the David Souter of the United States Senate, I guess, and severely disappointing the hardline Republicans who sent her there. I mean, I guess it's a possibility. I assume she's always looked up to her brother Lindsey and is intent on upholding his political ideals, but as there were none to go by, we're not sure where she's going to be. A Master in Fine Arts tells us nothing in particular. Oh, arts, not fine arts, but I guess crappy arts. I don't know. Rehabilitation counseling sounds like a pretty good art to me. It's really fine. Career, South Carolina Commission for the Blind. I mean, I guess she took advantage of her connection to Lindsey Graham a little bit and got a leg up in governmental or quasi-governmental organizations. Nothing unusual about that, and not even something that I necessarily frown upon, and particularly if you're working on behalf of the blind. How'd she do? In 2019, Nordone became commissioner and agency head, of South Carolina Commission for the Blind, which administers vocational rehabilitation, independent living, and blindness prevention programs for South Carolinians who are blind or have low vision. Those are the ones you want to do the blindness prevention for, I guess. Everybody, really. We want to avoid blindness if we can. She also serves on the South Carolina State Workforce Development Board and its South Carolina Works Management Committee. In 2026, she was president-elect, of the National Council of State Agencies for the Blind, planning to start her first term in January of 2027, interrupted by just being, I guess, handed a United States Senate seat. Political involvement? Guess we ought to read it. By 2002, Nordone had appeared in television advertisements for Lindsey's campaigns that year for the U.S. Senate election. Unsurprising and not particularly revealing by itself. She continued to assist his subsequent campaigns, discussing her childhood in 2014 and 2026. Nordone supported her brother's campaign for president in 2016, introducing him in the first campaign speech. By 2008, she had worked in the South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation Department. She helped coordinate a work-from-home program for adults with severe disabilities for Time Warner. So hopefully, she learned something and she doesn't throw it all overboard for a temporary appointment to the Senate. But she may, in fact, who knows? She may also be just generally conservative or without principle, like her brother, possibly. Let's see. U.S. Senate, there's nothing there yet, obviously. She spoke to Tim Scott recently, who's now the senior senator from South Carolina. Let's see. Yesterday, Trump endorsed her for the Senate seat. She's been, nominated to the position on a temporary basis by the governor. It doesn't need an endorsement, but she's definitely going to win, so he came out to endorse her. That day, which was yesterday, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster appointed Nordone. I guess that was the endorsement. He floated the name. Trump said, okay, and so he said, all right, then I'll go ahead and do it. She's to be sworn in today. Bastille Day. How do you like that? Upon taking office, she will become the first woman to represent South Carolina in the U.S. Senate. And I guess congratulations on that, even though, you didn't do anything. But, man, I hope that you're somehow better than your brother was. Wouldn't that be something if she was just like, oh, yeah, I actually work trying to help people cope with disability. And so I understand that world, and I'm going to help in the United States Senate to the extent that I can. Wow. Well, that would be a surprise for you, South Carolina. She currently lives in Lexington, South Carolina, with her husband, Larry Nordone. They have 2 daughters. And that's all we got. United States Senator. It's weird. From time to time, you see people's spouses being appointed to these positions when they die in office. That's a frequent escape valve when you really don't know what you're going to do. And you just want somebody to take care of the seat while the politicians jockey for a position in winning a special election upcoming, something like that. And very often you find that they're willing to take over the seat and fill it and in tribute to their relative, whoever they may be, and also very happy to get back out of the game quickly. That's sometimes why they do that. But we're also a little bit weird with political dynasties. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. Is there any other? That's really it, kind of. There's no other information yet available about her. So that's a weird thing all by itself. And then, of course, lots of other news and plenty in Instapaper and more coming in as we speak on in my email, including. All right, let's see. We'll do some headline roundup and some things that maybe don't merit necessarily a reading of the entire story, but you need to be aware of what's happening in the swirl here. The Hill brings us this headline. GOP Senator Ron Johnson, perhaps one of the dumbest ones they've got, says he's not sure McConnell's photo with Elaine Chao basically circulated as proof of life. This is one where he had the newspaper. McConnell's not sure that the photo is new. I don't know how he explains the newspaper, although I will say that the versions of the photo that I saw show that there is a newspaper, but the date is not visible. But I guess you could look and say, oh, yeah, the local paper here in Kentucky, whatever it may be. What is it, Frankfurt Democrat? Is that the name of the paper there? I don't know. I remember the names of all these weird regional, or I guess they're not weird papers, but it's weird that I remember them because I worked at the hotline for a little while. There we go. No, I guess not. I don't remember the name of the. So that's I guess that's the answer to that. But I'm not certain what paper he purported to have in this thing anyway. What is the name of the paper there? So after bragging about I guess the State Journal. What's the Frankfurt Democrat? Or somebody's got the Democrat as their paper. Well, I can't remember anymore, but I do remember a lot of those regional paper names. Occasionally I remember them correctly, which is really amazing. Anyway, I guess he thinks that there's AI involved or never thought, or maybe he doesn't understand what having a newspaper in your photo means. I don't know what to tell you. Republican Ron Johnson on Monday cast doubt on the recency of a photo that Mitch McConnell shared of himself in the hospital alongside his wife. All he said was, I've just heard from some other sources. That was an older photo, so I really don't know. He told host Eric Bolling on Real America's Voice network. You'll never guess the name of the show. It's called Bowling, but not like bowling with a W. His name is Bolling. Maybe it's Bolling. I don't know. It doesn't mean anything. Although, I'll say that they've done this before. There's plenty of times when we've seen Republicans circulate or recirculate a photo that was actually taken considerably earlier and is meant to illustrate something completely different. But I don't know. I am warned and reminded, Ron Johnson is an extraordinarily stupid and extraordinarily conspiratorial-minded kind of an idiot, and you don't want to, cast your lot in with him if you don't have to. So, okay. Meanwhile, there's really still no particular proof if you're really being hard-edged about it. There's a new statement out, and newspapers are covering it, but it's a statement. It's a written statement, and nobody's seen him and talked to him or anything like that. So, you don't want to cling to the conspiracy theory that he's actually dead, or you might, but it makes you look silly. But on the other hand, they're doing themselves no favors by refusing to put him on camera. I wouldn't either. If he's in the kind of shape that you might expect him to be in if he were in fact absent from the Senate for so long and continued to expect to be absent, you wouldn't look great, and you wouldn't necessarily voluntarily put yourself on camera. All right, let's see what else there is to share here. First, I'll get rid of some of the garbage that stands in the way. So I pull in an awful lot of spam. But let's see. Other important items, probably, I don't know, I think we've exhausted what is in the email. Over on Instapaper, there's a couple more. Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. The biggest news. We'll move to a bigger story, and then we'll go back and forth between big news and crappy news. So you can look forward to that. Top news out of the courts today, I guess, and maybe we'll spend some time on this one. A federal judge has basically ripped the Trump versus the IRS quote-unquote settlement case apart and totally annihilated it, pretty much rejects the settlement, says what we all thought that a thoughtful judge could and should and maybe even would say about it, that there's just no case or controversy here. Trump is represented on both sides of the alleged case, and they brought it for the improper purpose of quote-unquote settling. So for never mind how they settled and the design of the settlement having a slush fund involved, the whole thing should never have been recognized as an actual legitimate case to begin with. So lots of writing about it. There was sort of news flashes about it last night, and that was all we had. And I socked some of those away, and I was going to grab some newspaper write-ups of it, but maybe what we'll do is we'll spend a little extra time on it and read Joyce Vance's Substack about it, because, she's likely to go into greater detail, really helping the judge twist the knife on this thing that newspapers just aren't going to do. So let's take this one. So Joyce Vance's Substack, Civil Discourse. It's going to be a little uncivil, I think, this time. Judge is a big no on Trump's slush fund, but like I was saying, more than that, we don't even have to get to the slush fund to say that this is wrong, although it's great evidence that the suit had illegitimate purposes to begin with. She starts right out here with a little note in italics that tonight's thing will be long but worth it. It's now the morning, of course. That's how long it was. Judge Williams wrote an opinion where every word is precise and important as she builds an airtight argument for reopening U.S. v. Trump for just long enough to undo Trump's slush fund deal with himself and make it stick, hopefully, on appeal. Let's dive in. Let's do it. You're right, Joyce. Go. Back on May 31st, which seems like a lifetime ago, even though it was only 6 weeks, I wrote to you on a Sunday evening, quote, the $1.776 billion slush fund, $1 billion slush fund that Trump is trying to get the courts to sign off on so he can reward January 6th defendants for their loyalty. And that was never entirely certain, but it was everybody's supposition. It's a good one. Well, anyway, it came under attack from an unexpected front last Wednesday when 35 former federal judges filed a brief urging Judge Kathleen Williams to reconsider her dismissal of the case. They argued that the situation requires judicial review of the extraordinary and historically unprecedented circumstances presented by this litigation and by the collusive, quote, settlement that invokes this litigation as the legal justification for its terms. The issue, as you may recall, was that the lawsuit Trump brought did not involve a legitimate adversarial process, with Trump on both sides of V in the case, as both plaintiff and the head of the unitary executive responsible for the decisions made by the defendant, the IRS. The judges suggested that the case was tantamount to fraud on the court. We discussed the case, why it was dismissed, and the motion filed by the former judges here, if you want a refresher, and there are some links here, but I think you remember. The judge ends her opinion like this, quote, John Adams warned, and she quotes John Adams, facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Well, he was a lawyer. Thus, whatever may be the parties' wishes, inclinations, or the dictates of their passion, they cannot alter the state of the facts or evade the rule of law. Let's see how and why she got there. In a remarkable 56-page decision, Judge Williams made her decision today. She's a former federal prosecutor herself, who also served as a federal defender, and then as the chief federal defender, I guess like public defender, before being appointed to the bench by President Obama in 2011. It doesn't take her long to signal where her opinion is headed. On page 2, she writes, quote, after a review of the record and the parties' statements, the court declines to adopt or accept the credulous exercise of divorcing President Trump's current job title from an understanding of what happened here. In footnote 2, this is going to get granular. You always read the footnotes of an opinion like this. The judge crystallizes her view of just how deep Trump's hypocrisy goes. Plaintiff Trump also, with no apparent sense of irony, criticizes the non-party movements, the 35 judges, that is, who filed this motion to reopen the case, and criticizes their political motivations, their previous disinterest in the case, and their purported inappropriate promotion of abstract grievances, as his brief puts it. She frames the case and the issue before her like this. The most startling misstatement advanced by plaintiffs is their characterization of this case as ordinary. Yes, Trump and his lawyers really had the audacity to say that. The judge calls them out for it, all the way out. The parties here are not private actors to a mine-run dispute recounting their proficiency in the art of the deal they negotiated. Lead plaintiff and defendants are public servants, the pinnacle of the executive branch, sworn to uphold the law, faithfully perform the duties of their office, and protect the interests of the American public. The issue before the court is whether, instead, they ignored ethical norms, court rules, and legal authority to manipulate the judicial process. The issue is whether they did so to gild their efforts to gain unprecedented access to the public fisc with the patina of legitimacy. That would be some thin patina there. There is nothing ordinary about this case, Judge Williams concludes. It is the very definition of sui generis, lawyer speak, for being in a class by itself. The case happened, we'll give you a little bit more before we break, because a contractor leaked tax information for Donald Trump and a lot of other people. As the judge points out in footnote 4, that happened during Trump's first term. The man was prosecuted by the Biden administration. Biden, that's right, and received a sentence of 60 months in custody. He was sued by a number of the other folks. They all complied with the 2-year statute of limitation for filing suit.
Hi, Kagro in the Morning listeners. This is Rebecca Romans, longtime listener and longtime supporter of the show. Do you love your non-corporatized, completely independent, commercial-free Kagro in the Morning show? Do you stand out among the crowd at the office water cooler when discussing current events because of all the up-to-the-minute news you've been brought by David Waldman? Then it's time to give back a little. David relies on contributions from listeners like you and me to keep this show on the air. Patreon.com is among the easiest ways to make secure recurring monthly donations to support the show. Patreon.com/KagroX will bring you straight to his donation page, where you can sign up for any convenient tier you like. A mere $5 a month. You'll never miss it. Works out to about 25 cents a show. That means that David is making 12.5 cents an hour, which, by coincidence, is exactly what the GOP wants to lower the federal minimum wage to. Once again, David is ahead of the curve. If Patreon.com doesn't sound like your kind of thing, there's always PayPal, or even the Square Cash app. Any way you choose to donate, please choose to donate. And thank you on behalf of David and the rest of us listeners. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Roots Radio. And yeah, we went all the way to the very end there. If you didn't hear me as I was fading out there, last note of importance about this is all of the other people who had their information exposed by this contractor working for the IRS, all who did sue, all of them who sued complied with the 2-year statute of limitations for filing suit, but Trump did not. He was president, and he couldn't find any lawyers. You know how it goes. Trump filed after the statute of limitations ran out. The judge noted that in every case naming the government as a defendant, the DOJ engaged in a vigorous defense. That is, every case until the instant, that is to say this litigation, despite the statute of limitations issue and a host of other problems with the case, DOJ simply rolled over for Trump. Like the DOJ could have said, you actually missed on the statute of limitations there. Let's get rid of the case that way. But they didn't want to get rid of the case. They wanted to settle the case, quote unquote, settle the case to steal money. So what do you know? For some reason, the DOJ forgot there was a statute of limitations and decided, let's waive that whole thing. Next up, there must be an actual controversy between two parties with different interests on either side of the case for the court to have jurisdiction over the case. In other words, jurisdictional problem. Not unlike standing. This is slightly different, but here I guess you might say that I guess you could sort of infer from all of this, well, you have no standing to bring the case if you are also if you also embody the DOJ and the IRS, and you could sort of direct them, according to the unitary executive theory, to correct the errors. But anyway, no jurisdiction. That's another category that'll get you thrown out of federal court. We're not allowed to hear this case because it's not even a case. There's just one guy handing himself some money. And remember, that's how Trump characterized it publicly when he spoke about it. I'm suing myself. Look, that comes up right next thing. It's not just a technicality. She continues here, consonant with the general principle that no person may sue himself, adverseness is lacking where one party controls the other party, and courts don't hear cases like that. The judge finds plenty of reasons here that the parties aren't adverse, including, first, one party controls this litigation. Quote, defendants are the Treasury Department, an executive agency, and the IRS, the largest bureau of the Treasury Department. Both defendants are unquestionably part of the executive branch and ultimately answer to its chief executive, President Trump, hoisted on his own unitary executive theory, she says. And secondly, the conduct of executive branch actors demonstrates lack of adverseness and improper motive. And then, quote again from the opinion here, defendants' actions or inaction, as directed by the DOJ and the subsequent, quote, resolution of this lawsuit, leads the court to conclude that parties' interests were one and the same. Right. Certainly true. All right. But in the judge's view, it goes beyond that. And for whatever reason here, they have thrown in a screenshot from footnote 35 here. It has been reported that a principal deputy associate attorney general advised United States attorneys around the country that the president is the department's, quote, chief client. That is ordinarily not true, not the case. But, this being their view, you might as well go ahead and use it against them. If he's the chief client, then they're clearly they're clearly unfit to represent the IRS, the other party in the suit, if there even is a suit. But a better solution is, no, there isn't. This isn't a case. We can't hear it. We certainly can't bless your settlement because there's no case to settle. Everybody get out of here. In the judge's view, it goes beyond all that. She is particularly concerned that high-level Justice Department officials are still representing and indeed have an obligation to continue considering the interests of their former clients from private practice. You remember that that's the case with Todd Blanche being Trump's attorney when he was out of office, representing him in the various cases against him, and that he's basically just still doing that. The problem is that the Associate Attorney General who signed the slush fund settlement agreement, Stanley Woodward, quote, represented several individuals charged in connection with the events of January 6, 2021 at the United States Capitol. He also represented Walt Nauta, who was President Trump's personal aide and co-defendant in the criminal matter involving the return of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. I know she doesn't know the real name of the place, or she's not allowed to say it anyway. She's being very serious. But yes, not just Blanche, but Stanley Woodward, who actually signed all the documents with and pleadings related to this case, which isn't even a case. It's a significant concern to the judge that the settlement agreement created by the stroke of Woodward and Blanche's pens is meant to fund claims raised by people who were defendants in a number of different situations involving Trump, including the Mar-a-Lago documents case and January 6th, which she writes, quote, have been referenced as quintessential anti-weaponization and lawfare claims. Then she draws the trap shut, noting that instead of either recusing because of their previous representations or vigorously defending this lawsuit as required to do so by DOJ policies and procedures, the lawyers, Blanche and Woodward, agreed to a, quote, settlement involving a staggering amount of money potentially benefiting former clients. Blanche has additional issues. He was also involved with the release order, which the judge notes was, quote, signed only by who? Acting Attorney General Blanche, extends a blanket grant of immunity to all plaintiffs and their families and affiliates, whatever affiliates may mean, that's in quotes there, and precludes all current or possible investigations or actions before any other agencies or departments. The release order also purports to bar the IRS from conducting any future tax audits of President Trump, his sons, or their entities. Like, why would that happen? Of course, cover for more crime, but it's just not within your purview. What are you doing? That's a real problem because it violates a law titled, quote, Prohibition on Executive Branch Influence Over Taxpayer Audits and Other Investigations, which, the judge notes, states, it shall be unlawful for any applicable person to request, directly or indirectly, any officer or employee of the Internal Revenue Service to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of any particular taxpayer with respect to the tax liability of such taxpayer. The explicit text of this statute prohibits President Trump and his lawyers, one of whom was former White House counsel, from asking for or promoting termination of an audit directed toward him. Trump v. IRS is starting to look like a case of be careful what you ask for. Not all judges in the Southern District of Florida are Eileen Cannon, and Judge Williams has combed through the record in detail to determine, factually and legally, what the outcome should be in this matter. So, the judge concludes that there was never jurisdiction for a court to hear this case because the parties' interests were never diverted. Whether executive branch actors can privately agree to give themselves and their former clients blanket immunities and billions of dollars in tax monies for legally undefined grievances was never an issue advanced to this court. The question is whether the parties could do so by claiming to be adverse and engaging the legitimacy of a court proceeding. The answer is a resounding no. The lead plaintiff and the government are one, a fully realized unitary interest, because plaintiffs have no answer for the fact that the lead plaintiff, President Trump, directs and controls the defendants. Next up, some discussion of Rule 11, which means you're in trouble. Literally. You may recall, Joyce writes, that we anticipated this argument when we initially discussed the case. The judge notes she can consider Rule 11 even after the case is closed. Without a request from any party, the rule provides a remedy against litigants who engage in frivolous behavior. And the judge notes, when an attorney files a pleading in federal court, he certifies that, among other things, the pleading is not being presented for an improper purpose. Filing a lawsuit just to extract a settlement is an improper purpose. The court can use appropriate sanctions against a party who has abused the judicial process. One example, in the 11th Circuit, is a situation where Rule 11 sanctions are appropriate. It is a case filed in bad faith for an improper purpose, as it's said here. Here we have such a case. Certainly a court should not be a forum for a party that cynically views a lawsuit as a vehicle to achieve a predetermined outcome. I'm suing myself, the judge writes. I'm suing myself is a comment, of course, that Donald Trump made, as she notes in footnote 61. That leads the judge to consider what sanctions are appropriate here. District courts have broad discretion to tailor appropriate and reasonable sanctions under Rule 11, she concludes, and a court may impose both monetary and non-monetary sanctions. She concludes that in this situation, the most important consideration for her is that Rule 11 is intended to deter future misconduct, and with that North Star set, she gets to work. Some bullet points. She refers Trump's lawyer, Alejandro Brito, to the Florida State Bar for disciplinary proceedings. As to another of the president's lawyers, who is not a member of the Florida Bar, Daniel Z. Epstein, she denies him pro hoc vice status, that is to say, waiving the necessity to be certified by the Florida Bar. He's certified by a bar in another state. They waive him in, essentially, and say, yes, you can handle this case. The law is, the law is more or less the law everywhere. You want to know the nuances of state law, obviously, and procedural rules, but we trust you're a studious type of person, and we'll learn them. We'll let you practice here pro hoc vice. But not Daniel Epstein. He doesn't get it. All right, so let's see. As she puts it, that is what permits out-of-state lawyers to participate in a specific case in a court other than one that licensed them in the Southern District of Florida for 1 year. Then there is a provision that applies to the Trump litigants themselves. They can't use the supposed settlement agreement. They can't use it to keep the government from investigating or charging them or doing anything else. No money, no immunity. Right? In considering her inherent authority to sanction the Trump plaintiffs, the judge writes, in abdicating its responsibility to zealously defend the interests of the United States, no small thing, the government entered into a, quote, settlement that deviated from its litigation posture in similar actions, disregarding DOJ policies and accomplished objectives beyond those authorized, as well as those specifically prohibited by law. Under these circumstances, the court may reasonably infer that the government failed to defend this lawsuit or to respond to the court's jurisdictional inquiry because its position would not withstand judicial scrutiny and because resolution of the threshold issues identified by the court would not have favored its preferred outcome to this case. The judge concludes that the plaintiffs, including the sitting president of the United States, quote, acted in bad faith, using the court to try and, quote, confer legitimacy upon a course of action that they were unwilling to subject to judicial review. The plan to set up a slush fund and relieve Trump and his family of any responsibility for back taxes or forward-facing investigation. That justifies monetary penalties. And she writes that the retired judges who sought to intervene may seek reimbursement for their legal fees. Then the judge lowers the boom. Like it hasn't gotten here yet? Okay. Finally, the clerk of court is directed, all caps, directed, to mail a copy of this order to the State Bar of New York, of which acting Attorney General Blanche is a member, and she gives his bar number there, and if you want to know, he's number 419-2456, and a copy to the District of Columbia Bar, of which Associate Attorney General Woodward is a member, number 997320, if you want to know, where disciplinary proceedings are currently ongoing. She notes in footnote 70 that ethics complaints have been filed in New York and the District of Columbia against Acting Attorney General Blanche and Associate Attorney General Woodward. She wants those state bars to know what she has concluded here. That's a powerful statement coming from a federal judge. Trump can and almost certainly will appeal to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and that's why the judge has gone to pains to try and write an airtight opinion. She concludes in the same vein, the court, she writes, and while that could be a reference to herself, it is almost certainly a guidepost for appellate courts as well, need only look to the uncontroverted facts here. 1, Donald Trump is president. Boo. 2, President Trump controls the actions of the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, IRS CEO Frank Bisignano, and all executive branch actors. 3, President Trump, through Executive Order Section 7, okay, also controls the litigation strategy and interpretation of the laws guiding the Department of Justice. 4, for the 109 days that this case was pending, no attorney representing the United States filed a notice of appearance or any document indicating the government's position, interest, or awareness of this matter. 5, it was a $10 billion suit. You should maybe take notice. 5, defendants' actions are consonant with the dictates of Executive Order Section 7. Because there was never a proper case before the court, there was nothing to settle. This action was never about a party seeking judicial resolution of a legal issue or a factual dispute. The nature of the suit itself and the conduct of the parties and counsel from its filing make plain that this was an attempt to use the court to provide some legitimacy to an agreement to confer immunity to people and entities affiliated with the president and to earmark billions of dollars from American taxpayers to redress grievances not defined in the law. Judge Williams declines to aid Donald Trump in his scheme to take the taxpayers' money for himself. Ensuring that our courts are used only for the express purpose created by the Constitution is the obligation of every judge and an obligation that this court must discharge in light of the matter before it. Like so many district judges before her, Judge Williams has done her job by examining the law and the facts and doing justice. The courts can only protect the rule of law, if they care, if the public pays close attention to what happens inside them. That's what we're doing, and that's what they Joyce, does here every day. We do it every other day. Read the opinions, follow the facts, and explain what they mean without the spin. And, of course, then a plea that if you find value in that work and want to help make it possible for everyone to keep reading, why not join their community of paid subscribers? And if you would like to know what Joyce Vance has to say and are happy to support her but would rather have somebody else read it to you, you can, of course, support our little community here as well. You know that. We try to remind you every day, and maybe we can give you some fresh reminders over the next couple of days. Scott is prodding me, and properly so, that we might want to refresh our appeals, and that may be in the offing very soon. Okay, I wanted to give you the very detailed read on the situation, even though, you could have said it in 2 minutes. Hey, he lost that case. She dismissed the whole thing. She threw out the settlement. She threw out the case entirely. There's not even a case here. Plus, she sent them to disciplinary proceedings. So that's pretty good. That would be the quick and dirty version of it. But it's important that you hear the reasoning and all the best parts of it pulled out that way in a longer dissertation on it. Okay, there's lots more, as we said. And while we're on Todd Blanche, perhaps we might take a look at this piece in the New York Times. This one up at the top of the list in Instapaper. It's an interesting reminder. We know this. We've read about this before, that Todd Blanche is in tension with. It does not like weirdo Eagle Ed Martin, who I think currently sits with a remit in the United States Pardon Attorney's Office, where he's absolutely in over his head. But remember that, anyway, at one point they tried to make him U.S. Attorney for D.C. That didn't fly. And we've read before, for whatever reason, Todd Blanche does not like Ed Martin. I mean, it's hard to like Ed Martin, I'm sure. And I guess if there's anything that inures to Todd Blanche's credit in the world, it's that he recognizes that Ed Martin is an incompetent boob and an ideological wingnut. I mean, so's Blanche, or he's become one, but at one point Blanche had a serious career and Martin not the case. So it's interesting that he differentiates himself. Blanche, though, is still a dirtbag. Blanche was driving force in retribution campaign, emails show, and I don't think that the tension with Ed Martin is a major theme necessarily in this, but it occupies a lot of space up at the top of this article in the New York Times. The subheader says the cooperation of Todd Blanche in President Trump's retribution against enemies will be a flashpoint in his confirmation hearing to be Attorney General beginning on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. So it's good to put this on the record now. Glenn Thrush gets the byline on this one for the Times. Todd Blanche, then the Justice Department's number 2 official, and he really is. And you understand why I say so. Had been on the job for only a couple of months in May of 2025 when he was handed a migraine in a Detective Columbo trench coat by the name of Edward J. Martin, Jr. Colorful. Got it. Mr. Martin, a right-wing lawyer, that's what Blanche is too, but a right-wing lawyer who championed the cause of the January 6th rioters, that's kind of what Todd Blanche is too also, now that I think about it, had just been forced out as the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. The White House then inserted him into Justice Department headquarters, in part to oversee a task force to investigate claims that the Biden administration had targeted President Trump and his allies. Of course, they also prosecuted the contractor who leaked his tax information, but no credit given for that. Mr. Blanche, who once led Mr. Trump's criminal defense team, did not believe that Mr. Martin, a provocateur with minimal prosecutorial experience, had the chops and know-how to do the job, according to current and former officials who requested anonymity to discuss private conversations. Although, if you read between the lines, no, not even between the lines, if you read the explicit terms of Judge Williams' decision that we just went over with Joyce Vance's write-up, Judge Williams doesn't really think Blanche has the chops to do this right either, as it turns out. You might have suspected that he had them, but he sold them out for, loyalty to Trump. He thought he could just maybe get away with this one. I suspect he knew what he was getting into. Anyway, I am frustrated, Mr. Blanche wrote to Mr. Martin after less than a month on the job, documenting a relationship that swiftly descended from tense to testy. He moved quickly to rein in Mr. Martin, scheduling a check-in meeting every Friday, according to a trove of internal Justice Department emails obtained by a government watchdog and provided to the New York Times in advance of Mr. Blanche's confirmation hearing to be Attorney General on Wednesday. Mr. Blanche, a methodical former federal prosecutor, also created an organizational plan for the weaponization group that assigned key investigative lanes to some of his own deputies, and that ensured, among other things, that he might have tight control, or that he had tight control over one of the most sensitive issues on his plate: demands from Mr. Trump and his supporters to identify, investigate, and punish those who had once pursued them. The multifaceted portrait of Mr. Blanche that emerges from a 352 pages of documents, obtained by American Oversight, that's the watchdog aforementioned, is of a Trump loyalist who is committed to executing the president's agenda, but also intent on keeping a firm grip on processes inside his building, perhaps because he has such limited control over forces beyond it. Mr. Blanche's cooperation in Mr. Trump's retribution campaign, both as Deputy Attorney General and Acting Attorney General since the ouster in April of his predecessor, Pam Bondi, is his defining characteristic in the view of his critics. It will be a flashpoint in Mr. Blanche's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Todd Blanche oversaw senior Justice Department officials pursuing politically charged investigations, convened recurring meetings of the so-called Weaponization Working Group, and committed departmental resources to advancing President Trump's efforts targeting political opponents, election administrations, and other high-profile vendettas, said Chioma Chukwu, Executive Director of American Oversight, which obtained the documents through the Freedom of Information Act. It's amazing that that still works. Senators, or maybe it doesn't, but it's amazing that they did get these documents. Senators should judge him not by his assurances at a confirmation hearing. They'll attempt to try to rehabilitate him there, but by the record he has already built, she said. Mr. Blanche's defenders argue that he has been a low-key but important check on Trumpian excesses, slowing down or countering Mr. Martin and other Trump advisors, including a federal housing official, Bill Pulte. The newly disclosed emails cover a relatively narrow but nonetheless crucial patch of battleground in Mr. Blanche's tenure at the department: how to enact Mr. Trump's Day One executive order to, quote, correct past misconduct by the federal government related to the weaponization of law enforcement and the weaponization of the intelligence community. I mean, and of course, every Republican accusation being a confession, that's what they went on to do with it. During the first half of 2025, it appeared as if the department's weaponization group would be a major, perhaps central part of Mr. Trump's drive to punish those who once held power, to hold him to account. That is less the case now, Thrush says. Much of the action has migrated to the U.S. Attorney's offices, including in Miami, where prosecutors have been grinding away in an effort to build what Trump loyalists describe as a, quote, grand conspiracy by the Biden and Obama administrations, despite a paucity of evidence. It is not clear, more than a year and a half into the administration, if the group will ever exercise the power supporters applauded and critics feared. But at the time of Mr. Martin's arrival last May, Mr. Blanche diverted a significant complement of top lawyers in the Deputy Attorney General's office to the group, records show. Or the deputy attorneys, but I guess Deputy Attorney General's office. Okay. And people close to Mr. Blanche said it still remained an important vehicle to identify and address wrongdoing, even acts that fall below the threshold of criminality. Two of his top aides were instrumental in overseeing the task force's operations: Emil Bove III, who served as the department's enforcer before leaving for a federal judgeship in September, and Colin McDonald, the senior aide who was recently assigned to run the administration's new fraud unit. That is to say, the unit that does all the fraud, I guess. One Blanche aide, Christopher James DeLawrence, a former law clerk for Judge Eileen M. Cannon, the Trump appointee in the Southern District of Florida who presided over the case involving his handling of classified documents, was responsible for investigating potential wrongdoing by the special counsel Jack Smith. Mr. Smith, as you know, oversaw the documents investigation in Florida and another into Mr. Trump's attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Kendra Wharton, a longtime Blanche associate who served on the president's criminal defense team, was assigned to investigate, quote, coordination between federal prosecutors and Alvin L. Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney who successfully prosecuted Mr. Trump. Ms. Wharton later recused herself from the inquiry, citing an unspecified conflict of interest, according to the emails. She left the department in late July of 2025. Others in Mr. Blanche's office led teams responsible for digging up information on hot-button political issues. An FBI memo that targeted a conservative Catholic group in Richmond, Virginia. Federal scrutiny of conservative school board members and prosecutions of anti-abortion activists under the FACE Act, a 1994 law that prohibits obstruction and intimidation at women's clinics. One team listed on the internal roster, led by another Blanche aide, Paul Perkins, focused on a single person, Tina effing Peters. A pro-Trump Colorado elections official convicted and imprisoned for state election-related crimes, whose sentence was later commuted by the state's Democratic governor, strangely enough. Mr. Martin was given personal control of two investigations he had long championed, investigating the prosecutions of January 6th rioters, even though all of those convicted, including violent criminals, received clemency from Mr. Trump, and a probe into President Biden's use of an auto pen. Jared Wise, a former January 6th defendant who was assigned to Mr. Blanche's team, also worked on the investigation into the Capitol riot, but resigned earlier this year, saying on social media that he could only, quote, expose the abuses by the FBI and DOJ against J6 defendants from outside government. Mac Warner, not Mark Warner, but Mac Warner, an ally of Mr. Martin and a former Republican official from West Virginia, was assigned to investigate election fraud. One email shows Mr. Warner spending several hours at the office of the Director of National Intelligence, oddly enough, an early signal of the expanded role the White House envisioned for the agency, and that's where they pushed Tulsi Gabbard out and put Bill Pulte in. One of the weaponization group's most active members was Nick Davis. I guess this is good for getting some names to watch and all of this. But Nick Davis, a young lawyer from Iowa with close connections to the staff of Senator Chuck Grassley, the Republican chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. In early 2026, Mr. Blanche removed Mr. Martin from the Anti-Weaponization Committee. Mr. Martin kept his second title as pardon attorney, but was forced to move to a Justice Department satellite office across town. Like literally didn't even want to see him during the day. The Milton, if you will, of the Justice Department. All right, we'll return to this after a quick 1-minute break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's get through this one here. I know it's getting a little bit dry, but I do enjoy having the names called out so that when they are on trial later, we remember where we first heard the name. Okay. We left off by noting that Ed Martin got physically moved to another Justice Department satellite office across town so that Todd Blanche would never have to lay eyes on him again. The task force, the weaponization guys, has accelerated its efforts since his ouster, according to senior department officials, releasing reports on purported bias against Christians. Oh, look out for that. And another criticizing Biden-era investigations of anti-abortion activists. Both have been criticized by Democrats as biased. A third on the FBI report in Richmond is expected soon. The emails reveal a vivid contrast. What are we talking about? The FBI report in Richmond. Only vaguely rings a bell. I'm trying to think about what that might mean. But let me move on with the rest of the reporting here. The emails reveal a vivid contrast between the garrulous Mr. Martin, who revels in his image of a rumpled, inquisitive gumshoe of the right, and the more circumspect and strategic Mr. Blanche, who remains focused on a higher professional prize. The two appeared destined to clash. Mr. Martin's exchanges with the senior department officials suggest he regarded their orders as suggestions. I guess he really thought, that he had been plucked from obscurity personally by the president, who recognized his unique genius, as opposed to somebody just said, how about if we put this clown in this job over here? And so I guess he considered himself to have a free hand in the DOJ, and Blanche is about insisting that he does not. All right. In a May 30th, 2025 email, Mr. Blanche accused Mr. Martin of discussing an unspecified investigation that may have been presented to a grand jury and of failing to clear an error-strewn statement sent to a reporter covering Mr. Martin's link to an anti-Semitic activist. This is becoming a real problem, Ed, wrote Mr. Blanche, then serving as the Deputy Attorney General, adding that it was the fourth time Mr. Martin had flouted media protocols. Mr. Blanche accused Mr. Martin of violating the federal rule that prohibits government officials from discussing evidence presented to a grand jury. This is an investigation, he wrote, adding, aside from the fact that talking publicly about investigations is a violation of DOJ policy, giving the media and the public a heads up about what we're doing is not helpful to the investigation itself. A top Blanche aide had another criticism. Mr. Martin's team had inflated his title in an email to a reporter. Ed is referred to as the Associate Attorney General, he wrote. He's not the Associate AG. He's an Associate Deputy AG. Okay. Well, the mistake was corrected before the reporter's article published, which makes it sound like Glenn Thrush might have been the author of that article. But anyway, just wanted to keep up on that one. One, because it's funny to see Ed Martin getting stomped, even if it is by Todd Blanche. Two, we find out more about Todd Blanche's role in coordinating so-called anti-weaponization efforts, hypocritical anti-weaponization efforts in the federal government. And three, learn the names of people who will come up again if they ever endeavor to unravel this thing, whether during this administration under a Democratic Congress or later on. I do hope they don't drop this stuff. All right. Other things that require our attention. Short story that I just wanted to acknowledge and say I'm glad to see that this is the case. We don't necessarily really need to read this article, though it is from futurism.com, and I'm sure they'd like to have their moment in the sun here. We will credit Maggie Harrison Dupre for this piece that I guess is all in the headline for me. The backlash is so strong. So strong to what? Well, you'll figure it out. The backlash is so strong that people with, quote, pervert glasses are afraid to use them in public. Yes, a lot of men and their behaviors have ruined this product. The product, of course, is the Meta smart glasses, the AI glasses. And I'm so pleased to hear that the pervert glasses tag has stuck with them. I can't recall exactly where I saw it first, or if I did. But I recall having sort of this, inspiration of sorts to say, that's what they just come right out and call them pervert glasses. But I had probably been prompted to that at some point by somebody else having done so, but I couldn't specifically remember having seen it. But definitely easy enough to do. Given that they have the cameras built in. And I do think that's basically what people are using them for. As they say in the subheader here, it's probably closer to the actual case that some subset of users have really ruined it for everybody. But I love seeing this nickname hang on it and be more widely adopted. And I guess this is a way of publicly shaming these things out of widespread use. I like that. I'll give you just a taste of what's going on here. Meta's camera-equipped AI glasses, as they call them, pervert glasses, as you call them, are so divisive that some adopters are now leaving their expensive smart glasses at home, as Engadget reports. I'm sure they say Engadget, right? Influencers, mostly men, have been using the glasses to inconspicuously and non-consensually, by the way, capture footage of themselves. Think about what you could be doing with these glasses, right? They'll enable you to access the full knowledge of, the human experience via the internet instantaneously. You could be doing such great things with your glasses, enhancing reality. But what are people actually doing with it? Like with most technological innovations, certainly those related to the internet, typically they go immediately either to porn or some other prurient interest. And golly, giving people glasses with secret cameras embedded is going to result in weirdo men getting their hold of these. I mean, surely some women have these glasses, but, I think this was a product. Even if you don't even bother thinking about what the applications are going to be. Who's going to wear glasses like this? Men. So basically, that's what they're doing. And then what happens? Well, it goes immediately to sex. Influencers, mostly men, have been using the glasses to inconspicuously and non-consensually capture footage of themselves approaching women and attempting to hit on them. Interactions they've posted online for content. I'm sure these guys consider themselves to be, practitioners of some sort of expert school of pickup stuff. But it just seemed like you were destined for a crash at some point, right? Okay. What kind of person are you? I'm the kind of person that would buy or accept as a free gift, because I'm an influencer, Ray-Ban glasses, Ray-Ban, Wayfarer style glasses, but big, heavy, thick, black rimmed glasses, but with secret cameras in them hooked up to the internet. And I'm really going to wear these things. What am I going to do with them? Oh, I'm going to film myself trying to pick up women. Wow. Let me just say, just generally speaking, the big rimmed glasses guys, maybe that's not really an activity for you. Generally. Now, these are, I guess, probably just as often, these are guys who don't need the corrective lenses, looks maxers and online influencers who just want an easy way of, filming the thing, and probably are thinking, the glasses make me look like the kind of guy who isn't doing this pickup material, make me look like a weirdo nerd, but we'll demonstrate for you the strength of our pickup agenda and talk our way through these nerd glasses. But instead, it's just a signal to everybody, stay away from these weirdos. Anyhow, they've ended up posting these things online for content. Some wearers have even attempted to extort victims of covert recordings for cash. That's even worse. That's on top of serious allegations of alleged privacy breaches by Meta itself. And then, of course, there's the simple fact that a lot of people just really don't like the idea of the world's largest and most powerful social media giant, which has a history of misusing biometric information and other data, facilitating abuse and surveillance in this way, especially as Meta has taken highly controversial steps to infuse facial recognition capabilities into their tech. The wearables have become so alienating that many people have taken to simply referring to the shades as pervert glasses. And that's what I really love about the story. In short, it's no wonder some owners aren't exactly thrilled to be seen in public while wearing them. That's a big win. Several of them told Engadget that while they were initially excited about the tech, misuse and allegations of privacy violations on behalf of Meta have made them hesitant to use the smart glasses outside of their own homes. A lot of men and their behaviors have ruined this product. A travel creator named Danielle told Engadget, I wouldn't feel comfortable around somebody wearing them, so I wouldn't expect anybody to be comfortable around me wearing them, no matter where I am. At this point, she continued, they're like a fancy paperweight. Good. That's the way it belongs. And I could see how a travel writer might, in fact, make legitimate and good use of it. It's easier to carry than a video camera, and you get the actual wearer's perspective of doing this is what you're going to experience when you go here. It would work. It would work with a regular camera too, or GoPro does just as well. But yeah, what can I tell you? You fall victim to, even though you haven't been victimized by any of these perverts directly, you're victimized nonetheless. They still manage to ruin your life, or ruin your preferred method of plying your own livelihood. So there you go. I just wanted to sort of throw that one in there. I think that's funny. Well done, everybody, for calling them pervert glasses. Keep doing it. Okay. Who else have we got here? There's another sort of small bore story, but a good day for bringing these things up. Jacob Wall is still alive, and I guess will be for a while. He's a young guy, but he's back in the news. And the blog Joe My God has the story. You can find him, of course, over at joemygod.com. A rapper has sued the notorious, and it's not a notorious rapper, but maybe he is, but it's not in his name. Rapper sues notorious MAGA fraudsters. And you know which one is paired with Jacob Wall. It's always, what's his name? Well, you know. because I don't. Jack Berkman, that's right. As soon as we get reminded of it. And again, just no really good, legitimate explanation for the relationship between these two weirdos. They're very different in age and other circumstances, and I find the whole thing very weird, but I have no proof of anything. All right, what's the story? A rapper has sued the two of them after paying them $600,000 for a pardon from Trump that never came. Wow. And I did see somebody, was it Ian Boudreaux, just happened to post about it. That raised my interest in it, brought it to my attention, and just flatly said, imagine paying Jacob Wall and thinking he was going to do a job. Right? As soon as you pay him, that's it. That guy's gone. Well, Joe is relying on Notice here and says that they're reporting that on New Year's Day, rapper Boosie Badass. I don't know. Is that are we pronouncing like Boosie Badass? It's spelled Boosie, Boosie, but I guess probably Boosie Badass, Badazz. So get it? It all gets reversed. Received a call from his lawyer that he'd been given a second chance. Two men, whom Boosie had paid $600,000 about 3 months earlier, had said in a phone call with his lawyer that they secured for him a pardon signed by President Donald Trump. The act of clemency would have wiped away his federal rap sheet, get it? Rap sheet, and saved him from an imminent sentencing hearing for possessing a firearm as a felon. But that pardon never materialized. This is such an easy scam. Why am I not in on this one? Now, Boosie, whose legal name is Torrance Hatch, is taking legal action against Jacob Wall and Jack Berkman, two far-right political operatives and lobbyists at J.M. Berkman and Associates. Who's the associate? Jacob Wall. To recoup half of Boosie's payment as stipulated in a contract Notice reviewed. So far, the pair have refused, citing an overrun of costs in conversations with Boosie's lawyer handling the arbitration, Jill Kraft. They also said they were effectively bankrupt. Yay, that's great, but I don't believe it. According to text messages reviewed by Notice. You can read the full article over at Notice, and I will open it up because it sounds entertaining. Oh, yes, there's more, says Joe, but we'll just rely on his news sense, his good news sense for what's the best parts of it. Wall last appeared here in November 2025. Oh, he's not going to digest what's new. He's just going to recount his track record. Okay, but that's worth doing. Wall last appeared here on Joe My God in November of 2025 when he and Berkman were reportedly paid $1 million to successfully lobby Trump to pardon a nursing home magnate accused of defrauding the government of $38 million. That one actually got the pardon. Wall and Berkman appeared here in May of 2025 when they were hit with a $5 million defamation suit related to their pedophile sting YouTube show. In April of 2024, the pair were fined $1.25 million by the state of New York after a federal judge found that their racist robocalls violated the Ku Klux Klan Act. In February of 2024, this is a long rap sheet, they were hit with an $11 million racketeering lawsuit from a man who says they falsely accused him of being a child predator. I guess that would be related to the YouTube show. In 2022, they were ordered to perform 500 hours of community service registering voters in minority neighborhoods. Did they do it? That same year, the FCC fined the pair $5 million. In 2019, Wohl was arrested on felony charges for allegedly illicit securities sales after having been banned for life from the National Futures Association. Wohl appeared on JMG in September of 2020, I don't know what, on Joe My God, of course, I forgot where I was. Wohl appeared on JMG in September of 2020 when he showed up outside the Supreme Court with a bullhorn to ridicule those mourning the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As many longtime Joe My God readers will surely recall, during the 2016 presidential campaign, Wohl and Berkman hired actors to falsely accuse multiple prominent Democrats and Robert Mueller of various sexual offenses. So there you go. And here is some embedded tweets featuring Boosie Badass's pardon push here. I guess no need to actually read those, although I am a little bit curious about what else is in the Notice reporting. Their story is how Boozy Badass's pardon push turned into a MAGA mess. The answer is by not working, I guess. The rapper hired 2 operatives known more for antics than advocacy to help him secure clemency from Trump. He's now fighting to retrieve $300,000 from him. Even that is interesting, right? They got $1 million fee from somebody, and they successfully got the pardon done. So I guess Boozy Badass would be justified in saying maybe they'd be able to do it. Although, why did you charge the other guy $1 million and me $600,000? I don't know. Not certain why it wasn't $1 million. But look what's happening here, right? Basically, he's agreeing, first of all, to arbitration. Like their contract calls for binding arbitration, and he's respecting it. And that $300,000 is refundable under certain circumstances, but $300,000 of it is just not. He's only suing for the $300,000 he thinks he can get, and they still say, no, we're not giving it to you. It's weird. That's all I can tell you. Perhaps I'll review this elsewhere offline to see if there's any other juicy details. I mean, if Joe passes on recounting any of them specifically, like I said, for today, we'll just trust that he hints that there's more. You should go read it. I'll agree to do so, but perhaps later on, so that we can get to a couple other fun stories. There are a lot of them. Let's see. Where can we go next? Gosh, there's an awful lot. As I mentioned. All right, let's throw in a couple extra ones here. Can I make this one work? This one would be, it's from the Financial Times, and I'm not certain, I know it's paywalled. I'm not certain, if I recall correctly, what our record is in getting a hold of texts from that publication in readable format. I think it's actually pretty difficult, but if I can get it, I'd like to add it to our record, having read the first of the Wall Street Journal articles and then the beginning of the second one about how, the rest of the world is now separating itself from, disentangling itself where it can from America, and that this is perhaps wider spread than just the NATO countries, but that allies in the Middle East and Asia are attempting the same thing. We read a little bit about that yesterday. Here, the Financial Times runs with the headline, RIP, rest in peace, the U.S. State Department. America's diplomats used to have global sway. Now they are besieged by their own president. This is a good point and well worth adding to the discussion as well. Alec Russell, Abigail, Housloner, and Ian Hodgson are the byline writers on this piece in the Financial Times. For an ambitious American diplomat, it is quite the time to be scouting for a new role, at least on paper. As of late June, more than half of American ambassadorships were vacant, including high-status posts from Germany to Saudi Arabia, as we call it. For would-be Africa hands, there's a particular opportunity. Nearly 80% of U.S. embassies on the continent do not have an ambassador. That's not a good look, generally speaking. Inside the U.S. Department of State, however, the job prospects for diplomats do not look so rosy. Since Donald Trump returned to the White House in January of 2025, he has made clear his disdain for what he has called, quote, a very foolish foreign policy establishment. As the official face and sometimes swaggering enforcer of America's position in the world, the State Department is accustomed to extraordinary respect abroad. Since the end of the Cold War, U.S. ambassadors and envoys have often dominated their hosts with the authority of imperial satraps. But 18 months into Trump's second term, the department is not just sidelined, it appears under siege. Abandoning the precedent of the past 60 years, Trump has brushed aside the Foreign Service officers who have typically run at least two-thirds of embassies. Of the 101 nominations for ambassadorships in his second term, just 9 were career diplomats. All this is against the backdrop of, was this swinging? Is that right? Swinging cuts, really, to the department, whose workforce has shrunk by more than 3,000, over 20% since Trump resumed office. Administration officials present the shakeup as an overdue reform of a bureaucratic and out-of-touch arm of government. State has, they say, become obstructive, losing sight of its purpose to help achieve America's national security objectives. Diplomats warn of a crude politicization and a purge of experts in an America-first culture that scorns regional expertise. All the while, traditional U.S. allies bemoan the loss of the steadying voice of the State Department from day-to-day global diplomacy, even as deals crafted by relative ingenues fail to take root. We are looking at the most damaging crisis in the 102-year history of the Foreign Service, said Nick Burns, who served 31 years in the U.S. Foreign Service, most recently as ambassador to China until Trump resumed office last year. Next section here, weakening American power. State Department veterans are aghast. Their alarm is not just over the jobs and standing, the loss of jobs and standing, but over what they see as a weakening of America's authority through the loss of institutional knowledge and a pivot from diplomacy. Things are quite bad, says Bill Burns, who served in the U.S. Foreign Service for 32 years, including as ambassador to Russia and Deputy Secretary of State before heading the CIA under President Joe Biden. Burns argues that Trump's policies are doing even more damage to the department than Joseph McCarthy era in the 1950s, when the senator's Red Scare campaign led to a loss of expertise on China. That was on one relatively specific set of issues, and it cost the United States in significant ways for the next 15 years or so until the Nixon-Kissinger breakthrough with China, he says. But this cuts across the board. It's not just one region or one set of expertise. The former CIA chief highlights not just what he describes as the administration's retribution against the department and career officers, but almost even worse, the dismissiveness towards professional diplomacy. Trump has relied on confidants to broker deals, such as last month's Memorandum of Understanding. I would have enclosed that in quotes, with Iran, which has now all but fallen apart as the two countries trade strikes. By the way, yes, Trump issuing a proclamation to Congress just yesterday that this renewal of hostilities with Iran constitutes a new war, essentially, a new expedition there, restarting the 60-day war powers clock, in his view. But this is a trick he's pulled before. But hey, what can I tell you? Nobody's got the numbers in Congress to stand in his way. So we all just say, no, that's not how this works, or we scream it that that's not how this works. And he continues to make it work that way anyway, in the face of all opposition. Anyway, yes, Trump has relied on confidants to broker these dumb deals like this thing with Iran. The deal now having all but fallen apart as the two countries trade strikes. Many of the president's critics have blamed the fragility of that deal, and terms some say favored Tehran on Trump's decision to sideline experts. You need that kind of apolitical career expertise to be able to compete with, in this case, Iranian negotiators, who I know from personal experience are deeply versed in the issues, adds Burns, who was involved in several Iran negotiations himself. The same is true if we ever get to a point of serious negotiation on Russia and Ukraine. Yael Lampert, a 27-year veteran of the department who was fired as ambassador to Jordan on the first day of Trump's second term, is blunter. We would say more blunt ordinarily, I would say. We were outplayed, she says. The Iranians are experienced negotiators, and they brought teams of experts with them who knew those issues inside and out. The U.S. did not, and so unilaterally put our side at a disadvantage. Thoughtful and deliberative. Next section. In the spirit of the Trump administration's broader battle against what it labels as the deep state, officials frame the cuts to the department as thoughtful and deliberative plans to realign it with America's first agenda. They will, a spokesperson said, allow it to move at the speed of relevance. Not sure what that's supposed to mean. They usually say the speed of business, but it's not supposed to be business. The speed of relevance. Means nothing. What is the State Department's function? Asks one senior Trump administration official. It likes to think it's the Foreign Policy Center. That's not true. Its job is to represent the president's foreign policy, not to make it. Okay. But, usually there is a policy. When Marco Rubio was appointed Secretary of State at the start of Trump's second term, he came into the department, the official says, and declared this, whatever this is, this isn't working. Department insiders acknowledged State was due a rethink, you shouldn't. One veteran says it has not done enough in recent years to address flaws such as overlapping responsibilities. Another says the organization could sometimes be passive-aggressive in response to its political masters. But diplomats fear the reforms are a pretext for a wholesale downgrading. They also worry that the pace of change, as shown by last year's sudden closure of USAID, the development agency founded by John F. Kennedy, has sometimes calamitous consequences. And, of course, that's actually like widespread death and suffering. There is something to the argument that state was long overdue consolidation and modernization, says Jacob Shapiro, looking for middle ground, I guess. The John Foster Dulles Professor of International Affairs at Princeton University. But he adds, it feels like it was done very quickly and without a lot of analysis of the consequences for U.S. diplomacy. That is to say, in my view, it was done wrong, improperly, and with no regard and no intent in beneficial reform.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue reading this piece. I had to scroll down to see how long does this thing go, and it's one of those pages that's deceptive because all the comments to the article are included in this scroll bar, and I started to think, oh my God, this could go on forever. But no. But it is lengthy. We left off, though, pointing out from, Jacob Shapiro, in understated fashion, Princeton University professor, says it feels like the whole thing was done very quickly, without a lot of analysis of the consequences for U.S. diplomacy, which, of course, and I mean, that's actually quite significant. And I don't know, now we need, Axios. Why it matters? It matters because diplomacy is actually quite nuanced and important, and people pay attention to these things. And if you send idiots to do American diplomacy, and the aim of the American diplomacy is stupid to begin with, you find yourself in situations where longtime strategic allies who are important and maybe the chief vectors of American power globally, soft power certainly, begin to separate themselves from the United States, and there's enormous reputational and power loss around the globe, which will be felt for decades to come and relegate us to second or third class status eventually, as we're cut out of everything, and perhaps a new locus of superpower comes to rest elsewhere, and elevating Canada along with it, to our great embarrassment. Not that the Canadians don't deserve it, but hey, anyway. You want these things for yourself. Back to the story here. Allies of the administration cite the start of the Cold War some 8 decades ago as the last time the department faced such drastic change. What is clear is that the roots of the restructuring lie in Trump's first 4 years in office, when he was infuriated by the department's reluctance to do his bidding. James Carafano, of the Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank, says Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State in the second half of Trump's first term, followed the model of most of his predecessors, whether Democrat or Republican, of doing my thing and let the department doing its thing. He adds, Pompeo did what the president wanted, but didn't mess with the inside of the department. His model was keep the president happy and keep the institution happy. In his second term, Trump wanted more alignment with his vision, such as it was, I guess. He can't barely see out of those squinty, puffy eyes, but whatever. It's about exercising power from top to bottom and having the State Department that he wants. I mean, again, there's no vision. It's just, I don't know, what if everybody had to do everything I liked and nobody could do things that I didn't like? That's the vision. It's not a great one. Trump has made his foreign policy hierarchy clear in his second term by his choice of mediators for global crises, business friends and donors, such as Steve Witkoff and Tom Barrack, and people with close ties to the Trump family, such as Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. For generations, presidents have appointed intimates as special envoys and allies and donors to occupy the most glamorous embassies, such as London and Paris. Some have been hailed as effective diplomats. But presidents have previously balanced patronage with the deployment of experienced diplomats. The very rationale for the Foreign Service when it was set up in May of 1924 was, says Nick Burns, to replace the patronage and spoils system of the 19th century with real expertise. But who would want that? The return of such an approach weakens, he argues, America's insight into the world and ability to navigate it. Many of our most experienced diplomats have been summarily fired, he adds. Now there are no career diplomats in the rooms where it happens. That's an own goal. Ooh, World Cup terminology for you. The Trump administration dismisses much of the criticism as out of touch with the modern world. There is less use for cables back to Washington about atmosphere and local politics than in previous decades, they argue, adding that in the era of social media, 24-hour news cycles and direct communications between world leaders, the on-the-ground observations of a U.S. embassy are less necessary. The role of an embassy is to be a logistical hub, says senior administration officials. A senior official who gets quoted here. In this climate, U.S. diplomats are now routinely ignored, and not just by the administration. The career officers I speak to are reading the newspapers at their desk or turning in circles writing a paper that doesn't go anywhere, says a former senior U.S. diplomat. Diplomats representing America's allies from Europe and the Middle East to Asia acknowledge they have gravitated from cultivating their traditional interlocutors at the State Department to Trump's inner circle and the envoys. The shift is not just because of where the influence lies, but because U.S. diplomats may have little more insight into Trump's foreign policy than their foreign counterparts. They can also fall prey to self-censorship. Career diplomats are still meeting foreign officials, but they are very cautious about what they say, says the former senior U.S. diplomat. That should be the case, actually, but okay. Deputy chiefs of mission and ambassadors are largely not doing real reporting. They are very careful about what they send back to Washington. Oh, I see. Okay, that we shouldn't get. Rubio, who serves as Trump's national security advisor as well as Secretary of State, spends far more of his time at the White House, where the decisions are made, officials say, than at his department's Foggy Bottom headquarters. Such developments deepen the impression inside and outside of the department that it is embattled, if not at bay. The gutting of the department is like a medieval siege, says the former senior diplomat. First, they lob the cannonballs into the town, then they salt the fields. Culture change is our next section. If there is one thing on which veteran diplomats and MAGA activists agree, is there? It is that the State Department is undergoing a sweeping change of culture. Trump's team has moved fast to impose its America First vision on a department they see as being liberal, hostile, and prone to leaks to the press. The spirit of revenge as well as revolution is in the air. There were a lot of people who thought they were the policymakers and they would just argue and dissent, says the senior administration official. It was very hard to get things done. In the end, you'd get some mealy-mouthed memo. Of course, that's what we got for the Iran war deal too, so mealy-mouthed memo. Career Foreign Service officers reply that they traditionally saw themselves as apolitical public servants and warn of a climate of fear with people looking over their shoulder and worried that they're going to be tested for their loyalty to a MAGA worldview. Nick Burns disputes Trump's allies' claims that the department had virtually become an liberal echo chamber. We tried in my decades at state to make sure we created an environment where people could speak up and argue when they thought the policy was wrong, he says. Our argument was if you create that environment, then when the decision is made, you salute and move on. Bill, and again, that's something we can connect to the overarching themes of the show, right? The presumption of regularity. The reason you, in the end, take your orders from the State Department brass or the president or the White House or some combination of all three. Well, I don't know what the third was supposed to be. The intelligence community, perhaps, is that you knew that you had a pretty good understanding and a pretty good reason to believe that there had been serious deliberations, that opposing views had been aired, and through whatever process, been aired, acknowledged, perhaps defeated, and you didn't get anywhere, but you got a vetted product, and that was the reason that you say, all right, well, these are my marching orders, and here I go. But now you don't have that confidence. You can't be sure, and in fact, you have reason to believe that it's not the case, that when you're handed marching orders, these have not been vetted. These are not the product of a deliberative process. These are perhaps the ravings of a lunatic and somebody whose brain is disintegrating hourly, and it's very hard to stand up and salute those when you don't respect the people or process that brought them to your desk. Bill Burns highlights a new focus in the State Department on fidelity. He equates this with a test of what people's political inclinations might be, from the entry process all the way through promotion and evaluation. I just think it's deeply unhealthy, he adds. For all its flaws, in my experience with the State Department, people generally check their political views at the door. You start to beat that out of people, you end up kind of imitating a lot of authoritarian systems who browbeat career public servants and wind up making bad choices. In the 20th century and the first decade of the 21st, transitions between Republican and Democratic secretaries of state tended to be smooth, not least because the parties usually shared the same center ground regarding America's role in the world. But the takeover of the Republican Party by its America First wing has changed all that. And by the way, I think they do us a disservice by referring to them continuously as the America First wing, considering that generally speaking, the orientation and the marching orders that result are essentially Russia first. That's problematic. This does us no favors by covering for them as America first. The lightning rod for internal argument over this change is the Ben Franklin Fellowship, a body of conservative current and former Foreign Service officers founded 2 years ago with the declared aim of promoting conservative ideas, personnel, and recruits. Matt Boyce, or maybe Boise, I don't know, B-O-Y-S-E, one of the three founders, joined the State Department in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was president. In the past 3 decades, he says, quote, it drifted further and further to the left. It started under Bill Clinton, and then during Biden, it went on steroids. As examples of liberal bias, he identifies the intensified focus in the Barack Obama and Biden administrations on diversity, equity, and inclusion appointments, and the increase in USAID programs, which he says, quote, did not advance the national interest. Well, most experts disagree and conclude the opposite. And of course, why bother with diversity, equity, and inclusion when you're dealing with the entirety of the rest of the world? Just show them white people and white men at that and leave it for that. They should all aspire to be white men anyway. Sure. There were lots of good things happening in the department, but it was moving to the left in atmosphere and policies, he adds. If you are a liberal and you don't notice it or think it's perfectly normal, I guess then you don't notice it. They also think reforms just require more money, more employees, more programs. If you are part of the 50% of America that is not progressive or liberal, you say, wait a second, this is going in the wrong direction. Or you might say, no, it's still going in the right direction, but I wish the policy was different. But should we be engaging with the rest of the world increasingly? Yes, you could think that as a conservative. Boyce insists the BFF, that's the Ben Franklin, I guess, whatever it is, Foundation, what was it? I'll scroll back, Fellowship, but BFF, not what most people think of. Anyway, he insists it's a big tent conservative network rather than exclusively MAGA. There's a mixture of people from Reaganites to libertarians to America First Trump supporters to people who liked John McCain. I bet there isn't. That's my guess, though. That's what he says anyway, referring to the interventionist former Republican presidential nominee, McCain. Their common denominator is they are not liberals. Many members have lost their jobs during the cuts, he adds, which is why they're not in it anymore. So, I think it's increasingly MAGA is what that really means. Career diplomats, however, talk nervously of the BFF as being at the heart of a new culture in a department that polices people's politics. PPP. Some ambassadors are being asked for their views on the January 6th storming of the Capitol by Trump supporters, says the former senior U.S. diplomat. That's bad news. There's a clear sense that there are political minders around, says Lempert, the former ambassador to Jordan under Biden. There is an unprecedented fear factor where people are afraid if they offer criticism or alternative policy approaches, it can be perceived as disloyalty and they could lose their jobs. Boyce has little sympathy for diplomats' talk of a chill political wind. Some Foreign Service officers are defending their legacy, and others are baselessly crying discrimination, he says. It is a little rich when people have been on top for decades suddenly to suggest that they're being discriminated against. Oh, like Christians, maybe? BFF strongly supports the administration as it tries to move the ship of state back to where it belongs. No going back is the next and maybe last section. How much should Trump foes seek to restore the State Department to its old self? This is one of the big questions Democrats will face if they regain the presidency in 2028. Some foreign policy thinkers aligned with the party accept that in today's America it would be politically unacceptable to push for a return to the country's pre-Trump role of global hegemon. They contend that the challenge is to reimagine U.S. diplomacy. For example, they say that given that America's partial retreat from the world seems irreversible, it's harder to justify the cost of the full suite of embassies, even at a time when China is pushing hard to win the hearts of the global South. Indeed, one strategist argues that a Democratic administration should take advantage of Trump's very badly motivated reforms to rethink the department and adjust it to the needs of a world where leaders routinely WhatsApp each other. Get it? But that's the way they communicate. This is interesting, though, because this brings me back to another of my own themes in thinking about things that Republicans tend to do, quote-unquote, policy reform as bridge burning. Let's destroy the former order such that even if we find out that our ideas about the new order and how it should be shaped are completely wrong and even dangerous to American interests, you can't go back to the old way even if you want to. And on the one hand, we shouldn't cede that ground, but on the other hand, it's likely true that you just can't reestablish this no matter how hard you try or how much you might want to, unless the rest of the world wants it too, and there's no indication that they do. Veteran diplomats concur that a turning point has been reached. Bill Burns, the former CIA chief, suggests the old State Department may never return. Whereas in the first Trump term, the assumption was that with a different administration and a different outlook, in a 4-year cycle, you could recover and repair a good bit of the damage. This time, it's more of a generational kind of challenge, he says. And that's because the damage has been spread out over 10 years plus. It'll be 12 by the end. What's more, he adds, it would be an error to try to resurrect the old model. Well, the one cardinal mistake that I think people could make if you had a different administration in the beginning of 29 is to think that this is just a question of turning the clock back to the way things were. All right. Having reached the conclusion, that was good to put that on the record. We got a few minutes more to put some other stories on our radar screen. There are many, and I'm going to have to pick and choose, and we'll see which ones we get to. And we still have the balance of the week, of course, to do still more. Let's see. What is this one here? This is a Blue Sky thing I put away for myself, and I should check in on what this is. Yes. Oh, this was the notice I got last night about the judge throwing out the so-called settlement, but now we have other write-ups on that one. Man, there's an awful lot. Let's see. I should throw this in there because I meant to connect something else to it as well. Wall Street Journal. All right, that's going to require some tinkering, but the headline is a good and interesting one. let's see. Can I get to it here this way? Perhaps this way. All right. From the Wall Street Journal, investigators find Corey Lewandowski. Remember him? Still around. I mean, not in government, but he's still alive. Investigators find Corey Lewandowski may have been involved in improper DHS contracts. Well, of course. And we heard that story, and we got an inkling that that was not only a possibility, but generally speaking, the aim of his having been involved in DHS operations to begin with. But it's important, and you wonder who's throwing who under what bus, or whether this is just something that they wave away because he's Corey Lewandowski again, or what. But I don't remember what the connection was and why I was thinking this, but when we read the other day about Kash Patel being taken to task by Chuck Grassley, I guess, basically, for his lavish Make-A-Wish Foundation lifestyle that he's conducting for himself at the FBI, and then found out that he had been called away from the FBI's jet on his way to fly to wherever his girlfriend was performing and summoned to the White House. And I don't know, foolishly, I guess, I and others thought that this was him being called on the carpet by Trump to answer for, at least for bad headlines, even though, I mean, I don't understand what would Trump even find troubling about the grifter lifestyle that Kash Patel was living, unless it was, hey, you're not kicking up to the boss. That's right. That might be the connection. And it may be here. Why would Corey Lewandowski find himself under scrutiny for improper DHS contracting practices under the Trump administration? And the first answer that presents itself is Trump isn't getting a taste of it. I heard you stole $10 million. Where's my couple mil? Where's my cut of all this? And it might just be, you're on notice now, you didn't kick up to the boss properly, and you got to pay your taxes inside of the crime family in order to be given carte blanche to operate like this in the future. Anyway, as it turns out, Kash Patel was in fact summoned to the White House in an effort to instruct him how to proceed in the emergency subpoena of New York Times journalists. Trump called him and said, I want you to run this operation intimidating the press and subpoena these Times journalists who reported that I left the NATO conference on the old Air Force One because the new Air Force One isn't up to snuff defensively speaking. Well, that's a violation of national security, and I want you to find out who are these reporters and who are their sources and arrest them all. And it wasn't Kash Patel being reprimanded for spending extravagantly on his Make-A-Wish Foundation lifestyle. I guess that's probably never even rose to Trump's notice, although eventually he'll say, I hate when other people get headlines. Anyway, this story will focus on Corey Lewandowski. Let's see. Tarini Party, Josh Dawsey, and Michelle Hackman get the byline of this July 10th piece. We've been waiting a little while. Investigators find Corey Lewandowski may have been involved in improper DHS contracts. Subheader, Mark Wayne Mullen, White House officials have been briefed on the inquiry. So Mark Wayne Mullen, this is how you should proceed when you want to steal money. Take this as a precautionary note, apparently. Investigators have found evidence that Corey Lewandowski, it's hard to believe, but true, may have been involved in improperly awarding government contracts during his time as a senior aide, without portfolio, at the Department of Homeland Security, according to people familiar with the matter. Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen and White House officials have been briefed on the inquiry as investigators weigh a potential criminal referral to the Justice Department, which always does impartial justice. The people said the investigation is ongoing and a referral isn't imminent, some of the people said. Lewandowski, of course, top aide to former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem until March, when President Trump ousted Noem because of the drama and infighting at the agency. Maybe. Lewandowski served in the role in an unpaid capacity and took on a much more expansive portfolio than the status typically allows, the Wall Street Journal previously reported, including directing personnel and making contracting decisions. The The investigators are examining many of the contracts the department signed in Noam's tenure, and department officials had been surprised at how involved Lewandowski was in the process, some of the people said. He personally signed specific contracts, according to people who reviewed those documents or had knowledge of the approvals, despite not technically serving as a full-time U.S. government official. So, do those contracts exist? Don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Mullen recently informed White House officials about the investigation and some of the findings, one of the people said. Mullen and his team have cooperated with the investigation, and I do wonder sometimes whether Trump might actually know that very well. Have Corey sign them, because if they don't work out, or even if they do work out, later on, let's not pay. And just say, he's not authorized to make that contract. Why did you accept that? Thanks for the services. Bye. Anyway, in a statement, a representative for Lewandowski said he denied issuing contracts while at the department and said he hadn't been contacted by anyone regarding continuing investigation. I mean, just federal contracts like that are supposed to be a matter of public record. Is his name on them or not? Simple question, right? A White House spokeswoman referred a request for comment to DHS. DHS spokeswoman declined to comment. Necessary to tell you that, apparently. The investigation is being led by the DHS Inspector General Joseph Kufari, who regularly clashed with Noam during her tenure at the agency. A spokesman for the Inspector General's office said the office had long-standing policy of neither confirming nor denying specific investigations, but pointed to a previously announced set of audits underway into DHS contracting. Lewandowski, who served as Trump's first campaign manager in 2016, has had a close relationship over the years with the president, who valued his loyalty. The White House officials were frequently frustrated with Lewandowski's actions during his time at DHS, the Journal previously reported. Lewandowski had worked at DHS as a special government employee, a designation under federal ethics law, you know about it, that allowed private sector employees to take temporary advisory roles in government without relinquishing their outside salaries and investments. He was widely viewed at the department as Noam's chief of staff, whatever that may mean, with some going as far as to refer to him as the shadow secretary for the outsized role he played at the department. That is some outsized role. Early in her tenure, Noam made the unusual decision to essentially put all department spending over $100,000 under her purview, giving her and Lewandowski, who kept himself close by, so to speak, a say over many of the department's spending decisions. Mullen has scrapped that role since taking over the department. Shortly after Noam and Lewandowski left DHS, investigators searched the office of a contractor that worked with one of DHS's sub-agencies, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, as they started probing a network of aides to Noam and Lewandowski, the Journal previously reported. They seized records and a computer from the office of Kara Voorhees as part of a probe into her role in the FEMA contracting process. Kufari has also been auditing the $38 billion warehouse-to-detention program championed by Noam and contracts related to it. Under Noam, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement bought 11 vacant warehouses in the span of a couple of months, arguing the government needed to buy its own detention centers rather than leasing them from private prison companies or local governments. According to a report by CoStar, the real estate analytics company, ICE paid between 11 and 13% on average above the price for comparable properties. DHS officials have since decided to sell 7 of the warehouses. So definitely a ripe target for a investigation into the nature of that contracting and who all the people behind it. I think a rich and target-rich environment, you might say. All right, let's see. I'll add this relatively short, I think, story to the end of today's program just to get another random bit on the record. From ABC News here in D.C., Rebecca Turco reporting from July 10th, Pentagon to keep National Guard activated in D.C. through Inauguration Day 2029, the entirety of the Trump administration. Now, we're going to keep the National Guard activated in D.C. The National Guard will remain activated in D.C. through Inauguration Day 29 as part of President Donald Trump's anti-crime mission, allegedly, unless the president deems otherwise, according to the Pentagon. The DOW, as they now try to call it, remains committed you need the word to, supporting the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, really, and our federal law enforcement partners until law and order are fully restored in our nation's capital. Pentagon official told 7 News the D.C. Safe and Beautiful mission has been extended to January 20th, 2029, or until terminated by the president. All right, just pointing that out that it happened and how ridiculous it is. But there you have it. Also, I guess in that vein, I did see on social media overnight that there are some new pictures emerging. I guess they were draining the reflecting pool one more time or 10 more times to deal with the algae and the supposed quote-unquote damage to the bottom. And remember, now Trump has upped his estimate of the size of the gash by the vandals. Remember, it started as 200 feet, then went to 250 feet, then 300 feet, now 350 feet. It's now 350 yards, which, of course, you know is 3 times longer. And guess what? Draining the pool has revealed, in fact, yes, the bottom of the pool has, in fact, been damaged and marred in a way that could have affected the long-term viability of the coating that they supposedly applied. And it's, oddly enough, appears to be marred in the shape and length of, one might guess, tire tracks. Yeah, so more evidence still that perhaps the damage was, in fact, caused by his driving his motorcade of extremely heavy vehicles over the newly applied surface on the bottom of the reflecting pool. Can't make these tire tracks without positive traction, by the way, and why not? What is positive traction? Well, it's a limited slip differential that distributes power equally between the 2 rear tires. And has anybody ever been stuck in algae in the reflecting pool knows you don't have positive traction, you gun it, the engine, one tire spins, the other tire does nothing. Right. So this car had positive traction. It made it all the way through the algae slick surface. But there's more. Look, actually, you see here where they ran over the algae and the tire tracks stay flat and even. This car had an independent rear suspension. I'm just guessing. But yes, this is true. They are now revealing that this is the case. And I guess the National Guard is there to make sure that he doesn't drive through the bottom of the reflecting pool again. I don't know. So now the gash is 350 yards, and these vandals yanked this enormous piece of coating right off of the bottom, which, as you might guess, is probably physically impossible.
Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Once again, we credit Ian Boudreau with pointing this out. Moving a 350-yard section of this. Have you ever tried moving a large rug? Like, it's really actually quite difficult. Anyway, it looks like he caused the damage himself, as you always knew that he did. Time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and his roundup of the day's news. We'll see you tomorrow.